Hi, welcome to the Free and Equal Network, everybody out there in the Free and Equal Facebook Live world. I'm Christina Tobin. I'm the founder and chair of the Free and Equal Elections Foundation. We're a nonprofit 501c3 whose mission is to broaden electoral choices through education and direct positive action. We're going to be hosting our fourth United We Stand this April 29th at Texas A&M. The Reed Arena. We're going to the United We Stand event. What it is a solution-based movement uniting students with conscious musicians, artists, and thought leaders to awaken political and cultural change. So I want to get right to it. I want to welcome Mr. Jeff Berwick of the Dollar Vigilante Anarchapulco to the Free and Equal Network today. Jeff, thanks for coming in from Acapulco.
Yeah, my pleasure, Christina. Good to talk to you.
Great. We've known each other in passing, really, and gotten to know each other since really 2014 when you were there. I remember you at the creation of United We Stand, and even through those challenging times, and there were lots of ups and downs, I can say I remember there was a moment I looked at you and was looking at the stage, and you were by the wall, and you could just see, you could feel and what happened, and you've really been a supporter, I feel, towards Free and Equal since then, every day, and I really appreciate you sticking with us throughout this journey, Jeff, so much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Well, Jeff, for those of our viewers, and there may be a few out there or so that are not familiar with your work, can you let people know who you are and what the Dollar Vigilante is and the kind of conferences you've been doing? That would be wonderful if you could let them know, because you're going to be a speaker at United We Stand this April 29th, of course I should have said, and I'm really excited to have you. But can you let people know like who you are?
I'm still trying to figure out exactly who I am, but I write the Dollar Vigilante, and it's essentially a narco-capitalist Austrian economics-based financial newsletter. And we've been covering, essentially what we cover is the coming collapse of all fiat currencies and the US dollar. And of course, a big thing that we've been talking about since about 2011 is things like cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin. And we've been one of the biggest promoters of that because we see that as being what will come after that collapse, and in fact, what will hasten that collapse to some extent as well. And so I've been doing that for a number of years. And of course, I'm a big proponent of freedom. And of course, Free and Equal has free right there in the title. So that's, of course, why I'm involved in what you're doing, is I support anything to do with freedom. And because of that, I'm essentially an anarchist, or what you can call a voluntarist, or another word for it is anarcho-capitalist. And of course, a lot of people have the wrong meaning of that word capitalist. When I say capitalist, I just mean free markets, allowing people to trade freely amongst each other. That's all I mean by it. Complete freedom for humanity, not slavery like we have today under all of these governmental sort of systems. And because of that, I also host a show called Anarchast, which features things related to freedom, and that blossomed into what is now the world's largest voluntarist conference in the world called Anarchapulco, which you have attended here. I just saw you here a few months ago. Called Anarchapulco, as I mentioned, and we're now going into our fifth year next year in February, and we had about 1,500 people this year. We're expecting quite a bit more than that next year. And essentially, as I mentioned, I'm just all about freedom, and we don't have a lot of freedom in the world today. Most people don't really even fully realize that. They buy into a lot of the propaganda that we, especially in the US, you live in the land of the free, but it's one of the least free countries now in the world. Has massive amounts of extortion called taxation, has massive amounts of regulation, which is just government interference in the market, and of course, massive amounts of money printing by the central bank, which is actually the Federal Reserve, which is a tenet of communism. That's what central banking is. It's central planning of the economy and top-down control of the economy and the monetary system. And of course, that has nothing to do with freedom. So I'm against all of those sort of things. And that's what I do essentially at the Dollar Vigilante, is talk about these things.
Well, for those of you who may not know, Jeff is a prominent speaker at many of the world's freedom, investment, and cryptocurrency conferences, including his own, as you mentioned, Anarchapulco, right? .com is where you can find information about that.
Yeah, if you can spell it correctly. It's really hard to spell, but if you Google it, you'll probably find it.
And he has had regular appearances on media, including CNBC, Bloomberg, Fox Business. And as you are getting a feel and a vibe, his background in the financial markets date back to his founding of Canada's largest financial website, that's stockhouse.com, correct? In 1994?
Yeah.
So definitely there's no one more qualified to discuss the subject, I feel, or maybe I'm not sure about more qualified as far as these issues. And when you bring in anarchy and United We Stand, I really want to say, like, free and equal elections. Gosh, we have speakers from Peter Joseph of the Zeitgeist Movement, the founder, to Richard Gage, the founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, to now an NFL player, former player, alumni of Texas A&M, a star out there, and now turned yogi. He's one of our speakers. We have such a variety to Colin Cantrell, the founder of Nexus Earth, which is the co-host of United We Stand, and the cryptocurrency, decentralization, and so on. And so really at Free and Equal as a nonprofit, we're about bringing all these viewpoints together. And I know, Jeff, once you said, well, how does anarchy work with free and equal elections, and right, with the whole running for office and this and that. And boy, I understand that. I just often think the peaceful way of going about doing this is maybe the anarchist viewpoint will result in, when those start to run and the masses targeting congressional races in America, I think the anarchist viewpoint could really help enlighten to them to whether or not we need that much government, or in your case, no government at all. So again, we're about bringing all of those peaceful viewpoints together. And I'm really excited to work with you on that. Taxation, the Federal Reserve. I just interviewed G. Edward Griffin 2 days ago here on the network. What an expert. He actually lives 20 minutes down the road from me. And so he's become a friend, and I've learned so much about the Federal Reserve. Can you tell us a bit more of your viewpoint of where we at now with the Federal Reserve note? Really, the dollar, it seems to be, as the collapse is coming, it seems to be, from your viewpoint and putting all the pieces together. What's your feel on what's going on with that, with the cryptocurrency, how the wrongful taxation of the government, how it taxes the cryptocurrency? Can you kind of really dig in deeper? And for the audience, if you have any questions, feel free to message, and we'll get them over to Jeff.
Yeah, that's lots of things to cover, but really just looking at the overall state of affairs of things right now, we are really near the end of this current system. This system has generally been in place since about 1913, when the Federal Reserve was founded. It was founded on basically Christmas Eve in Congress. It's called Congress for a reason. It's actually a con game. The entire system is a big con. And they essentially took over the U.S. government at that time. And very quickly after that went into the Great Depression, which was actually caused by the central bank, by the Federal Reserve, on purpose. This is what they do regularly now. They did it in 2008, they did it in 2001. They're going to do it again soon, and they do it on purpose. They inflate the currency to get everyone thinking that everything's going well. Everyone invests in things like the stock market. The stock market goes to new highs. Then they sell all their stock, pull back the monetary creation, the money printing, which they call quantitative easing. They always like to use funny words for things that are basically just counterfeiting more money. And then they buy up everything at pennies on the dollar again. They've been doing this over and over for over 100 years now. Then, of course, 1933, we just passed the 85th anniversary yesterday of gold confiscation in the U.S. That's when, after the Great Depression, they said they had to confiscate all Americans' gold in the land of the free because of how bad the Great Depression was. Another scam on the American people. Some people didn't turn in their gold, thankfully, but it was actually legal law under U.S. law. You're supposed to turn in your gold to the Federal Reserve 85 years ago to the day. And then, of course, it progressed to 1971, August 15th, when Richard Nixon took the gold backing completely away from the dollar. There wasn't a lot of backing at that point, but it was completely moved away at that point. So then we moved into an entire world of fiat currencies that were backed by absolutely nothing. And this has gone on now since 1971. And what we've seen is all the governments have grown massively. Most of them are very socialist, doing a lot of what they call wealth redistribution, which is stealing from some people and giving it to others, but actually they steal most of it themselves. And we're seeing now all these governments are absolutely bankrupt. It's beyond the point of no return. It was actually beyond the point of no return about 10 years ago And many people knew that. Even Donald Trump talked about that a lot before he got selected. He didn't get elected, by the way. These things are always pre-planned at the top when it comes to those two parties. And that's part of the reason why I support what you're doing with Free and Equal is trying to get outside of that two-party sort of system democracy, so to speak, which is all a big scam. And but Trump actually talked about that before he got selected. He said, "Oh yeah, this thing's bankrupt. The U.S. government has way too much debt. This is out of control. The Federal Reserve needs to be totally just almost gotten rid of to some extent." That's kind of things he was talking about before he got selected. And then, of course, once he's president, completely turns away from every single thing he said and just continues on. And actually, Trump has had the biggest deficit now in U.S. history under his regime, and no sign of that even slowing down whatsoever. He talks about, oh, maybe in 2027 we'll balance the budget, which is what every president does. They just kick the can down the road, print more money, and go into more debt. So now we have the U.S. government now over $21 trillion in debt. It's actually going up so fast I almost have to check it daily. It was $20 trillion just about 6 months ago. And when Barack Drone Bomber, the Nobel Peace Prize winning president who didn't have one day of peace his whole presidency, when he came in 2008, it was less than $9 trillion. So we're now like getting close to the point of tripling since Barack Obama was in. And as I mentioned, Trump has no intention of slowing that down whatsoever. They're essentially trying to bankrupt the U.S. This is all part of a major plan that's been going on for decades. And so it's beyond the point of no return. We've had the Federal Reserve now at 0% or less than 1% interest rates now for over 10 years, which is absolutely insane. But the reason they do that is because if interest rates were allowed to rise, and of course that's what the Federal Reserve does, it does two main things. It counterfeits money, which actually steals from everyone. It's a hidden tax called inflation that most people don't understand. And they also manipulate interest rates. Both of those things, if either of us did it, would be illegal in the US for us to counterfeit money or to manipulate the market. But that's exactly what the Federal Reserve is allowed to do under the Federal Reserve Act. And so they have been printing money at sort of banana republic levels now for about 10 years, what they call quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and it's just going on forever, which is what I said would happen. And if, as I mentioned, if they allowed interest rates to rise even 5 or 10%, you now have the US government at $21 trillion in debt. So let's just say it's 10% to make the math easy. That'd be over $2 trillion alone in interest payments alone on the debt, which is pretty much the entire budget of the US government. So every single penny that was extorted from US tax slaves every year would have to go just to pay interest on the debt if interest rates rose to 10%. So they're keeping it at close to 0% as long as they can, and they'll probably move it up, and might be this year on purpose to crash the economy again. It will result in a depression that will be infinitely worse than the 1929 depression, and it will eventually steamroll into all fiat currencies collapsing. This will happen over the next few years. This is what I said in 2010 when I launched the Dollar Vigilante. I said, by the end of this decade, everything will have collapsed. All these things will have collapsed, and we're still on track for that. We still have a couple more years here, and sounds about right. And so you ask about how this relates to cryptocurrencies. Well, thankfully, Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever he is, in 2009, created a gift to the world in something called Bitcoin, the blockchain, and we now have a central bank controlled cryptocurrency that is decentralized, that no one controls. It's not anywhere. It's actually just computer code that they can't stop unless they turn off the power in the internet. So we actually have access to free market money for the first time, and they can't stop it. They can, of course, make it illegal, and many countries have, but hopefully a lot of people just stop listening to these extortion rackets called governments, and there will always be a lot of people who won't listen to all of their rules and regulations, which in the US, I think there's so many, you can't even look them all up. There's literally hundreds of thousands of rules and regulations in the US. I think there was a book written that every American breaks 3 laws every day. It's not the land of the free. It's the exact opposite now. So thankfully we have these cryptocurrencies now, and there's more than just Bitcoin. There's other ones as well. And we have the opportunity to survive this coming collapse, which has been all planned by the central bank and the people who control the governments. And it's not people like Donald Trump or Barack Obama or Bill Clinton or George Bush who control the government. It's people behind the scenes. It's generally the people who control the central banks. And it's not Janet Yellen or Ben Bernanke. These are people that they get from their school system and put them into places, and they read off of teleprompters. This is all a big show, all a big scam, and they're going to really collapse the whole thing very soon and try to bring in what will essentially be a one world government, one world taxation system, one world currency, which will probably be crypto or digital. I shouldn't say crypto, it should be a digital currency that will be controlled by them. So very unlike Bitcoin. That's the whole point of Bitcoin, is it can't be controlled by central banks. They'll have their own central bank digital currency, and then they'll be able to track every single transaction that happens in the world and tax it immediately. And that will be absolute tyranny like we've never known it if we don't avoid it. But if people move towards things like free markets and cryptocurrencies that aren't controlled by central banks and begin using them and stop using things like the US dollar, we can have peace and liberty and freedom on earth like we've never known it. So those are the stakes in the next couple of years. So that's why I've been so busy doing so many things, going to so many conferences, speaking wherever I can, working as hard as I can to try to wake people up before it's too late, because we're really coming down to the final end stage of the system now.
Yeah, that window is it is getting smaller. We still have an opportunity to fix things and to bring about real change throughout the United States of America. And when we do that, I feel the whole world will follow, Jeff. And I couldn't agree with you more on Congress and a con game. I've definitely researched back into the London Exchange of 1865, so seeing how the powers that be, the Rockefeller, Rothschilds, what they do to manipulate the market, scare, crash, so people sell off their gold and then they buy it at cheap, and same old, same-o. And as far as the one world currency, I recall seeing on one of your website or somewhere in an email, there was a magazine, was it the Rockefellers had back in the 90s or something, that stated they were going to have a one world currency in 2018.
Yeah, that was the Economist magazine, which is owned by the Rothschilds, which is one of the bigger families that control the central banks. And it was 1988. They said 30 years from now, 2018, that we're going to have a one world currency. And I think it's on track for that. And I think they're moving towards that this year in some form or another, whether it's an SDR or a digital currency. But before they do it, they have to collapse everything and then scare everyone into buying into this new system. So that's why we need to spread the awareness about what's going on, so that when this all happens, and it will happen, that a lot of people realize why it happened and who the real people behind it were, which is basically the governments and the central banks, and don't run to them to save them. In fact, do the exact opposite, try to get rid of them so that we don't have them anymore, so that we can have a truly free world for the first time. So that's really what it's all about. And yes, they actually tell people what they're doing. They're not all that secretive in those senses. They actually really put out, they put out a lot of these things years in advance. In fact, I go to the Bilderberg conference quite often to try to see what's going on there. We actually were some of the first people to actually get inside the conference went a couple of years ago. And they were planning the euro currency back in the 50s and 60s at Bilderberg. They plan these things decades in advance. These are incredibly smart, incredibly savvy sort of families that have been doing this for centuries, actually. And really, it just, people need to wake up and realize what's going on. Turn off their television programming. It's literally called programming for a reason. It's literally hypnotizing you with false propaganda. That's all the mainstream media is actually just government propaganda. Pretty much everything you see on there, and even Donald Trump mentioned this. Like I said, he mentions a lot of these things. They kind of have fun. They kind of tell people, but they don't really tell people what's really going on. Donald Trump says CNN's fake news. It is. It absolutely is. So is Fox. So is CBS. So is ABC. So is NBC. So is all of them. They're all fake news. They're all propaganda, no different than what you get in North Korea or would have had in Germany back in the 1940s. It's literally just propaganda, and people still believe it and they still react to it. And that's sort of part of the problem. And people don't realize what the real problem is. And the government and the media will always be trying to say, oh, the problem is North Korea, or the problem is Russia, or it's Iran, or it's capitalism, or it's anything but the real problem, which is actually them, the governments and the central banks themselves.
As D. Edward Griffin told me, the government was originally created to protect us, not to govern us. And when I look at the party system, Jeff, having been on the inside and seeing how the National Libertarian and Green Party work these past decades, at least decade or so, I've seen firsthand, and maybe we'll put in a book someday in great detail, not holding back names, of as a party becomes larger and inevitably becomes infiltrated. And so this government, this party system, parties that our founding fathers never mentioned parties in the Constitution, and George Washington warned us of parties, they're evil. It became very apparent to me about 10 years ago with the creation of free and equal elections. It really sparked from seeing my father wrongfully knocked off the ballot as a libertarian candidate in '98. And I saw firsthand how difficult ballot access was, and devoted a decade of my life helping to coordinate and gather over 1 million signatures to get candidates on the ballot, and did it nationally for Ralph Nader in '08. I would have done it for Dr. Ron Paul. So talking about the rigged monetary system, this one world currency, the fact that we can even think that our government is capable of such things as such as Pearl Harbor and 9/11 and the JFK and Martin Luther King 50-year anniversary yesterday assassinations, and now this one world, like that in itself is a problem, that we could even think that our government is capable of such a thing. And I'll leave it at that on behalf of free and equal elections. So United We Stand, what I've been learning in recent days from really experts like you and others in the monetary is that the taxation towards crypto is pushing crypto out of the United States of America. How is that taxation? Is the taxation happening where every time they sell and get a profit, they're taxed on it in the US? Why is it pushing people to Acapulco and Puerto Rico, which I want to have a minor announcement on that shortly as well with United We Stand in Puerto Rico.
Well, when it comes to taxation, taxation is a scam. It's a extortion racket. People need to realize, as you pointed out, the U.S. government has actually been behind. And I don't mean like the people in Congress or even the president to some extent. They don't actually do anything. There's people who control everything. This is sort of what some people refer to as the deep state or whatever you want to call it.
Jeff, you mean the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913, which is not federal, it's private, and simultaneously the income tax, which is funded this war? That wasn't a coincidence, really?
Yeah, no coincidence whatsoever. There was no income tax in the U.S. before 1913. They put it all in. It was essentially a takeover by private interests of the government. It's ongoing today. So all taxation is just extortion. It's no different than a mafia. The only difference between mafia and government is size. And the government just has a really good propaganda arm that really tries to tell people, listen, all this extortion that we're doing of you, it's to help you, and a lot of people still believe it. So what they've been doing with the cryptocurrencies is just like everything else. They tax it, they extort it, they try to take, try to kill the markets essentially, and take all of the good things from the market and steal them from the people, and that's essentially what they've been doing with cryptocurrencies. No surprise whatsoever. And so some people have definitely been moving out. I really recommend anyone who's really involved with cryptocurrencies get out of the U.S. It's very dangerous. The U.S. government is the most dangerous government in the world in terms of they have more people in rape camps and in cages than anywhere else in the world. I think they have like 8 times more per capita than any other country in the world. Most people I know in the U.S. have been arrested or in jail at some point. It's a giant. It's like everything's the opposite of what they say it is. It's not the land of the free. It's literally one of the least free countries in the world, and it's a very dangerous place. So if you're involved in cryptocurrencies, which they do realize is a major problem for their system, that they will go after almost anyone involved in cryptocurrencies in the U.S. in one way or another. And we've seen that with Ross Ulbricht, who's in jail with 2 life sentences for just having a website which allowed people to transact in a free market online using cryptocurrencies. He's in a maximum federal prison with hardcore terrorists and murderers and rapists for having a website. Charlie Shrem, of course, was arrested years ago. So many, and it's ongoing. If you just look every day, you can see people being arrested and put into cages for being involved in cryptocurrencies. So I really recommend, if you're involved in cryptos, not to be in the U.S. It's the most dangerous place in the world for that sort of a thing. And that's because most other countries just don't have that size of government, that amount of regulations and laws laws and actually enforce them to a massive amount like they do in the US. So yeah, they're doing that, and they'll continue to do that, and we'll see every country kind of doing that. But hopefully people just wake up and stop obeying authority and really just realize that the government is not there to help you. The government is your slave. They own you. You are a slave. There's no easier way to say it. When you're born in the US right now, apparently you're become a US citizen, which is one of the worst things in the world to be at the moment for numerous reasons. And you have something like $300,000 of US federal government debt overhanging you that you're supposed to pay off the rest of your life. If that's not slavery, I don't know what is. And that's actually heinous to actually do that to a newborn baby and bring them into this extortion racket so hard and so difficult to escape from. And so we're going to see that go ongoing. And we're seeing with all these governments, they're all so in debt that they're all sort of near collapse now. So we'll see what happens. They're going to get worse and worse until the collapse, and it's going to get pretty crazy in my opinion, but we'll see what happens. But hopefully a lot of people are just starting to wake up and starting to just not get involved in that system. Just stop obeying, stop paying taxes. It's extortion racket. It's literally slavery. And it's amazing to me that most people just don't even see it. That's how good their propaganda has been, and many people will actually defend it. That's what the whole movie The Matrix was all about, is people are so hopelessly inured to the system that they will kill you if they have to stop you from waking them up to what's really going on. And that's really the case, and it's really sad, but there's not much I can do about it except for just keep telling people what's going on. And I get a lot of people attacking me because of it, because they don't want to be woken up. They like their brainwashing. They like their cognitive dissonance. They like what they believe in, which is almost all wrong, all untrue information. And when someone tries to wake them up, sometimes people get really angry, but not much I can do about it except for just keep going on and keep telling people and see what happens.
Well, I wholeheartedly welcome you on our stage, and I'm excited to have you again on the stage this time at United We Stand. It's going to be at Texas A&M, the Reed Arena, April 29th. It's going to be beautiful. It's a very tightly, I thank you to the whole Free and Equal team out there wholeheartedly. Most of you have devoted countless and hundreds of hours to still be with us to this day is invaluable and priceless, and I love all of you really. And so to wrap it up, I know you have half an hour here on the let's see, a couple questions here rolling in. Yeah, it's kind of comments. So cute. That's cute, Gary Odom. So there are more comments and video coming. So anyway, so if you guys have questions, this is the time to do it, because I know Jeff's got to jump off here at the half hour. So I could keep talking to you for a while, but really, I really commend you on not running away from the problem, Jeff. I commend you on speaking your truth. And even though you're in Acapulco, you're still working to care and help, the United States. Here we are on this interview today. I can feel that you haven't given up in the United We Stand, or in the United States, that is, I misspoke. And, I've looked at different ways of the system. Do we build something on the outside? Well, if we do that, would the system maybe come back stronger than ever under this one world currency? That could happen. I think that's possible, and that's a scary thing, and I don't want to take that risk. And for me, the only peaceful way that I can see going about fixing things is replacing these people in office that are sociopaths, narcissists. And once we replace them, maybe those people will be anarchists. Maybe they'll have different viewpoints. Maybe they'll be more influenced by the anarchy viewpoint. Maybe government will cut back up to 20%. Some constitutionalists have told me, in order to get back to the origins of the Constitution, maybe accountability will rise within the government. Maybe there's people that will run for office, Congress being way more important than the presidential races, of course, those seats, and locally, because real change begins on the bottom up, from the bottom up. Maybe these will be people that are asked by their constituents to run, not the kind of personalities that are speaking. Maybe they'll have a technological, monetary sort of background as well. I think that will happen. Maybe someday we'll have a president, an independent presidential candidate that will win and pardon, rightfully so, individuals like Ross Albright. And so on that note, Jeff, did you have any final words? Can you plug some websites as well where people can find your work? And I'm excited to see you in a couple weeks or so in Texas.
Yeah, I have to run in less than a minute, so I'll just briefly say that, of course, I support people in the United States. I see all people as just being people. I don't see any of us as being different because we have a different passport, which are completely completely fraudulent sort of a thing that we need a piece of paper to travel around the world. We're all just human beings, and I support anyone who's trying to wake up, trying to get towards more freedom in any way they can. And that could also be through the electoral system. It's my least favorite way of doing it, but I am supporting Adam Kokesh of the Libertarian Party, who's running under the platform in 2020 for president of essentially shutting down the U.S. federal government and returning the power to the states. And then I'll work on getting the power from the states down to the city level, and then hopefully down to eventually 7 billion governments on earth. So I do have to run, but yeah, you can check me out at dollarvigilante.com, and I'll see you in a not too long, Christina.
One more thing, Jeff. Nick Clifford says, thanks for everything you guys do. Brave warriors. Oh, thanks, Nick. All right, take care. Peace. We'll see you in a few weeks, and have a great one. Appreciate your time. Bye, Jeff.